Hi, 6th graders. My name is Corey Shanker. Mr. Hunt has invited me to join you for your water rocket unit. I'm currently in Cape Canaveral, Florida. The building you see right behind me is the Vehicle Assembly Building. It's where NASA assembled the space shuttle. It's also where they're creating their next generation rocket, which will take people back to the moon and to Mars. Rocketry was something that Mr. Hunt got me interested in when I was in 6th grade. So I'm thrilled to join you. I'm here to help you create your first water rocket. Let's get started. So to help you create your first water bottle rocket, I've created this presentation which breaks down all of the major components of a water bottle rocket. Let's first start by analyzing how does a water bottle rocket generate thrust. So before you take your rocket to the launch pad, you'll need to fill it with a certain volume of water. Now you'll need to research to find out what the optimal water-to-air ratio is for a water bottle rocket to achieve the maximum performance. Now, once your rocket is on the launch pad, the remaining volume will be filled with compressed air. This stores potential energy within the rocket. So as soon as the rocket is released from the launch pad, that compressed air equalizes itself with the atmospheric air by pushing the water out of the nozzle of the rocket. Now, this is all based off of Newton's third law. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. In this case, the action is the compressed air pushing the water out of the rocket, and the reaction is the rocket being propelled through the atmosphere. So, then let's analyze what is the goal for this project. The goal is that you will be able to construct a 2-liter water bottle rocket that shows your understanding of rocketry concepts such as aerodynamics, rocket proportions, stability, and that you did your research to find what the optimal water-to-air ratio is. To complete this project, you must research what makes an effective rocket, you must incorporate your research into your rocket design, you must construct and counterbalance your rocket, and you must be creative and explore new ideas. Now, let's go over the terminology and the major components of a water bottle rocket. At the very top of your rocket is your nose cone. This is what creates an aerodynamic shell around the rocket. This helps decrease air resistance as your rocket is flying through the air. The majority of your rocket is made out of a 2-liter soda bottle. This is your pressure chamber. This is where the water and the compressed air goes. At the bottom of the pressure chamber are your fins. These help stabilize your rocket while it's in flight. And the very bottom is the nozzle. This restricts the flow of water and air while it's being propelled through the air, and this extends the duration of the thrust compared to just one short burst. So now let's break down all of those components and see how I would recommend and some tips and tricks that I've learned to create a well-performing water rocket. So let's start with the nose cone. And the importance of a nose cone, as I mentioned earlier, is it provides a streamlined shell to minimize the air resistance. It also acts as a room for a payload, and we'll discuss more about why you need a payload later on in the presentation. And finally, it acts as a crumple zone. If your rocket performs well, they can go over 300 to 400 feet in the air, and when it comes back down, it crashes into the ground. This helps prevents your pressure chamber from being damaged, so all you need to do is put on a new nose cone so your rocket is ready to fly again. To the right, there are some photos of nose cones that I've used in the past. I really prefer and enjoy to use plastic eggs from like Easter. They provide a nice streamlined shell and they look really clean. But you can also use the top of a 2-liter bottle, or you can, if you have access to a 3D printer, print your own nose cone. Now, let's then discuss the pressure chamber. The pressure chamber, one thing you want to remember is do not cut it. If you cut it, it will not be able to hold a pressure and you will not be able to launch your rocket. When pressurized, these 2-liter bottles can hold over 75 psi, or pounds per square inch. And to help reinforce the 2-liter bottle, we wrap the bottles with duct tape. Here is a diagram of how I would recommend one of 2 ways of wrapping your bottle in duct tape. The tighter the duct tape is, the more pressure and the safer your rocket is when it's pressurized. Now, rockets have exploded on the launch pad before, and here's a picture of a rocket that exploded. So make sure you're doing your duct tape well and securely around the rocket so your rocket doesn't explode on the launch pad. So the next component is fins. And the fins are extremely important for your rocket because they provide stabilization while your rocket's flying through the air. And some things you want to remember when you're creating your fins is that they need to be securely attached to your rocket. Now, I've seen a lot of rockets that as soon as they're launched, the fins are ripped right off, and then the rocket's flying without any fins. So you want to make sure your fins are securely attached. I've used construction adhesives, two-part epoxies, contact cement, and copious amount of duct tapes to make sure that my fins stay on the rocket. Also, you want to make sure that your fins are rigid and inflexible. A flexible fin doesn't provide the support the rocket needs as it's flying through the air. Also, all your fins need to be identical and spaced evenly on the rocket. If they're not spaced evenly or aren't the same size, it'll create an unbalanced force on the rocket. Now, I would recommend having 3 or 4 fins. 2 fins isn't enough for a water rocket, and 5 or 6 fins, you're just starting to add extra mass. In the description of this video, there are some templates that I found really useful to help make sure that your fins are aligned when you're attaching them to your rocket. There's 1 or 2 ways that you can attach your fins to your bottle, and you can have them either vertical or at an angle. If you have them vertical, your rocket won't roll or won't spin as it's flying through the air. But if you angle all of your fins just slightly, your rocket will spin as it's flying through the air. Though, be careful, if you're angling your fins, you need to make sure that they're done evenly and uniformly, or it'll create another unbalanced force and your rocket will veer off of course. So, to the right you see some pictures of possible fin designs. I personally like it when the fins reach down below the nozzle so the rocket can stand up by itself, but that's just my personal preference. Some possible construction materials are balsa wood, foam board, cardstock folders, or if you have access to a 3D printer, you could use that. For the balsa wood and foam board, it's something that you can find at your local hobby store. And the balsa wood, I would recommend it being like 1/4 of an inch thick, and the foam board being 1/2 an inch thick. If it's thinner than that, then it's likely to snap off when the rocket lands on the ground, and it's just not strong enough. There at the bottom right-hand side are some pictures of rockets that I've built. The one on the left has foam board, and the one on the right is balsa wood covered in duct tape. Okay, so there's one more secret for a well-performing water rocket, and that's to counterbalance your rocket. Now, to counterbalance your rocket, you need to understand what the center of mass is of your rocket and where it is. The center of mass is a point representing the average mass distribution of the body, or your rocket. There's a really great demonstration, and I'd highly recommend you do it with me. So grab a pencil, and all you need to do is balance the pencil on your finger. For a mechanical pencil, it's right about the halfway mark. And once you get it, it takes a second, but once you get it, you find the balancing point in the pencil. And that point is the center of mass. There's an equal amount of mass on both sides of my finger, hence why it's balancing. Now, we need to take this concept and apply it to the water rockets. Initially, the center of mass of a rocket is down by the fins, and you can do this. Just balance your rocket on your finger. And this is too low, and this is because the center of mass is also the center of rotation. So as your rocket is flying through the air, if your center of rotation is too low, your rocket will easily flip while it's flying through the air, and it won't achieve its maximum altitude. However, if you move the center of mass higher up on the rocket, it's harder for the rocket to flip over, and therefore you get a much more stable flight. Now, the desired center of mass position on a water bottle rocket, and specifically a 2-liter water bottle rocket, is about right where you attach your nose cone to your pressure chamber. So, to offset the center of mass up to that point, you need to add a payload, and this payload needs to be a weight. So, when you add some weight, it shifts the center of mass up towards the joint between your nose cone and your pressure chamber. Some possible weight materials would be rice, M&Ms, Skittles, Play-Doh, ball bearings, lead pellets, anything that has a significant amount of weight that you can counterbalance your rocket with. Now, don't add too much weight. I would start with just a little bit of weight and slowly add more until the balancing point of your rocket is right about where your nose cone and your pressure chamber meet. Now, That's all the tips and tricks that I've learned through all of the rocketry that I've done. But here are some great more additional resources that I found. Both of these are YouTube channels, Air Command Water Rockets and US Water Rockets. They are both great YouTube channels that take water rocketry from the very beginning up to an insane level. I'd highly recommend checking them out. Again, the links are in the description. That's the conclusion of the presentation. I hope you learned something and you gained some ideas on how to build your first water bottle rocket. Mr. Hunt has my contact information if you want to reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have, or if you just want to share your rocket ideas. I hope you have a great rest of your day and happy rocket building.